Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for a special Lettermen Live as spring ball winds down here at Ohio State. It's presented by Byers Auto. As always, I'm Austin Ward, joined by my colleague, Jeremy Birmingham, and our special guest again, Tim May. You may have seen his byline with us for the last couple of weeks, and we're going to get his thoughts, a lot of them today. So I'm not even going to waste time, Tim. There's only a handful of practices left. They're well over the halfway point. What's the number one takeaway for you this spring with Ohio State? Just take it.
The way they've been able to develop some depth on the offensive line, by hook or crook. I mean, with Thayer Munford on the rebound or recovery, and Josh Allaby being sick, for example. All of a sudden, we looked out there one day and Brandon Bowen was practicing at left tackle. He'd started the spring at right tackle. Nicholas Petit-Ferrer, is coming into his own because he's gotten a lot more time at right tackle because Brandon Bowen's been having to play left tackle. And right on down the line, Wyatt Davis talking about just the confidence he's feeling as these practices mount up. Josh Myers, what I always remind people about, the biggest thing about spring football, its biggest benefit is the development of the offensive and defensive lines because, they don't get to line up and practice. I mean, you can run 7-on-7 almost in your underwear, you know what I mean? And offensive linemen don't get to line up and what I call go against the fastball, on a consistent basis, except during these kind of like situations. And that's why spring is critical for the offensive and defensive lines to progress. And from what you're hearing, especially on the offensive line, there is some depth coming around. And of course, we all know about Harry Miller attending the meetings by proxy almost. I mean, with a little iPad sitting in the front row there, keeping up with everything that Coach Studraw was telling him, et cetera. So it's been an interesting kind of eye-opening experience here the last couple of weeks. Yeah, definitely. That's the most interesting thing we heard today was Harry Miller and Jonah Jackson as well. Attending meetings through FaceTime, sort of a novel concept. Berm is going to tackle that maybe for a story here with us in the next couple of days at Lettermen Row. And I think, Berm, that's an interesting sort of development for Ohio State because this spring was always going to be interesting without Thayer Munford, losing those guys that they lost, Isaiah Prince, Demetrius Knox, Malcolm Pridgeon on the inside. So much uncertainty, and you don't have Jackson, you don't have Munford this spring. It was like, well, you're not going to establish a starting five by April 13th.
You have to find some way to get these guys mental reps, and the mental reps in the spring, if you're not playing, are so important. That's what guys like Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis last year really suggested. Had the light kind of came on for them because they were just decided to start watching the game more closely, paying more attention. And when you're replacing 4 or 5 offensive linemen from last year's historic offense, and then the one guy that's actually coming back isn't playing, it puts you in sort of a bizarre situation. So I think for Greg Studraw and the Buckeyes, it's just so important that they can find ways to communicate with these kids about what the expectation is, because it's not just replacing 4 offensive linemen. The offense is changing. It's no more Dwayne Haskins. It's no more Mike Weber. It's no more crutches like Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell and Johnny Dixon. So everything is changing. We really don't know what this offense is going to be. And Ryan Day said it on Monday morning that a good college coach adjusts his game plan to his players. And I think they're still trying to figure out who their players are after having veterans and leaders for the last couple of years that you knew exactly what you had.
Yeah, I grew up in the I'm north of 60. Actually, I'm north of 65 now, but I grew up in that era where the term football factory came into being. And what it really, in my opinion, is always alluded to is, more than anything else, is the development of offensive linemen. I mean, that's where the big time programs like Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, and all these people kind of came along, and Ohio State, Michigan. And for example, though, Gavin Cupp is a great example of what I'm talking about a guy who some people kind of question him coming from a little bitty school when they assigned him. He even admitted, he came in banged up a little bit and kind of got banged. But all of a sudden this spring, at the end of like the fall and in this spring now, the light has really come on for him. And he's, if anything else, he's adding to some quality depth there and stuff. And that's kind of what spring is all about, is discovering those guys before your next round of big-time 5-star guys like Harry Miller and that group show up.
And that's something that I touched on there. With if you don't have Munford, well, suddenly you have Allaby, Bowen, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer all getting those reps that you would go to. That guy's going to be the starter left tackle. You know that. So when Allaby's not dealing with the stomach flu, which has been going around the offensive line, and also shaking up some of the degree of difficulty, that's been a benefit for them as they continue to grow to try and get to that level where that full 2 deep can contribute for the Buckeyes. That's a look at the offensive line, but we've had a number of different positions come talk to us as spring ball hit that midway point about a week ago for Ryan Day's first camp, as we talked about here on Lettermen Live, brought to you by Byers Auto. And Tim, I'll start with you. if we're going to talk about the offense, you have to talk about the quarterbacks. And I think everybody that got a look at what Justin Fields could do in some of those open practices, yes, the competition is ongoing. Yes, Matthew Baldwin is a legitimate option to potentially play for the Buckeyes down the road. But now it's starting to really trend towards this, what everyone kind of maybe thought going into spring ball, that Justin Fields is almost certainly going to be the starter for this team.
Well, that's the indication you kind of get from putting 2 and 2 together, but 2 and 2 don't always add up to 4. You know that. But when he loses his black stripe, that's yet another indication he's a fully fledged Buckeye, which means they're not afraid to play him. Yep. So take that for what it's worth. Yeah, I mean, when you watch him run around, he's a different kind of player than Matthew Baldwin. So it's kind of like comparing apples and pears, in my opinion. One's going to bring you something more than the other one is. But the thing about Justin Fields is I've tried to explain him to people who keep asking me about that wherever I am in Costco or a Meijer or whoever stops me, is he's sort of a combo of a Tate Martell and a Dwayne Haskins from the standpoint of
why would you want one?
No.
See,
listen,
last Friday I suggested,
from the standpoint he can run.
I suggested last Friday from watching the spring practice, the full practice, that it was a hybrid of Braxton Miller and Dwayne Haskins.
Okay.
Because he's got that.
You're trying to purge memories. That's okay.
He's got a straight line speed that Tate and running quarterbacks like Tate don't have.
But I was just trying to stay contemporary. I mean, Braxton
Miller,
long gone.
Braxton Miller played at Ohio State in
Braxton's
the early.
been long gone for 3 years or whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
right?
everyone forgot about him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's my point. Is he's a mix, but I mean by that I don't mean to take away from his passing ability, but I'm telling you, Dwayne Haskins Jr. was a special talent that I've never covered at Ohio State from just a pure passing standpoint, and it's going to be tough. But those aren't the shoes he's stepping in. He's stepping into Justin Fields' shoes. That's what Justin Fields feels like. Yeah. He's going to bring something a little bit different, a little bit more of a mix. And I think from what you can tell, just a little bit of practice we got to see, they're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, Byrne, what have you seen there?
Yeah, I mean, just to finish that thought, the guy that I always thought that Justin Fields reminded me of covering him in recruiting was Deshaun Watson. And I'm going to stick with that comparison. I think he's the best example in recent years of a guy that was as deadly with his feet and his arm, and he can make every throw, but he could also outrun a cornerback if he needed to. So we talked about the quarterbacks last Friday. I do think Matthew Baldwin can play here. I think that he's going to continue to push Justin Fields and make Justin Fields better, and I think that's something he desperately needs to have happen. I don't think that walking into camp here and being named the unquestioned starter was going to be the best thing for Ohio State or for Justin Fields. So
and by the way, Deshaun Watson, what set him apart was he ran only when he had to run,
right? But
when he had to run, he was extremely effective,
right?
And that's what set him apart, from a lot of these other guys we talk about, like you're talking.
Yeah, Fields is a throw first guy, and I think people need to understand that he's not a player that wants to run,
right.
But if he does, he is electric when he does. So to me, that's the end cap on the quarterbacks until we get to see them in the spring game. I'm very interested to see how they split up those reps and how they use those guys in the spring game next Saturday. But the rest of the offense, I think the biggest thing is what Ryan Day talked about today. Who's going to step up and be great when you have a group of receivers in Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor and KJ Hill taking over for three of the best players and leaders that the program has seen in the last 25 years. I think that's something that is going to make or break Justin Fields' the season, in my opinion, because what happened last year was that sort of perfect confluence of Dwayne Haskins being tremendous and three fifth-year senior receivers who elevated their game to match him. And I think that changed the offense last year. And when I think about what Justin Fields or Matt Baldwin really needs to be successful at Ohio State, they need that group of receivers to step up.
That's why you may see 4 out of every 5 plays in the spring game be a pass. I mean, they've got to get that in,
Absolutely.
And synchronized, whatever you want to call it. But then again, there were some moments last year, as we well know, stretches when the running game was ineffective.
Yeah.
So
in spring games, you and I have seen enough of them.
Right.
You're not going to run the football that much in spring.
No, because it puts a lot of people in jeopardy.
Yeah. So, by the way, it's a massive upset here on Lettermen Live, brought to you by Byers Auto, that Tim was the first one to mention Tate Martell and not Berm. So
where's that counter?
Yeah, that counter's going off. Boom. That's one for Tim. I think just for me, I bristled a little bit because Tim and I just read this morning what's going on with the Miami starting quarterback battle. First thing I read, Tate Martell looks very inconsistent with his accuracy. How weird is that? I never would have guessed.
Never heard of that.
Anyway, moving on from Tate Martell and the quarterbacks on Lettermen Live, brought to you by Byers Auto. We also had Larry Johnson a couple days ago to talk about the defensive line. And Tim, I think every year I stand here and the expectation is, they're going to get better than the year before. And I look at what they lost and I think, how is that possible? You take Nick Bosa and Draymond Jones off of the Rushmen. and suddenly they're deeper and better. Like it's crazy to me, the pipeline that they have, but I really believe that group can be better in 2019 than it was in 18 and than it was in 17.
Yeah, I mean, to me, where they've really, I think, upgraded is in the defensive tackle spots. I mean, from the standpoint of like 4 or 5 years ago, they were really thin at those spots. And now, you got Devon Hamilton sitting there. I mean, what B.B. Landers brings to the program. He's a little banged up right now. But then right on down the line, they've got these guys stepping up. Teron Vincent, Tommy Togiai, whose eyeballs, his eyes just light up when he talks about playing maybe a nose guard a little bit more. I mean, that's the kind of guy that Ohio State, in my opinion, has lacked when you compare it to defenses of Clemson and Alabama. As my good buddy Kirk Barton knows, I refer to those as A-gap stuffers, except I use another word for stuffer. But those A-gap guys that will just get after it and kind of like, you have to respect it on every play. And as Larry Johnson pointed out, they played some odd fronts last year. They played some even fronts. This idea of them possibly being just all even or all odd this coming year is not correct. I mean, they're going to still try to mix things up there, just like they're going to mix up things behind them with that new bullet position, et cetera. But yeah, defensive line wise, and who's the kid that took 97? Potter. I mean, as I asked Larry Johnson, that kind of takes guts to be the next Bosa, because that's what you're going to be compared to. And I said, have you explained what's expected from that yet? And he goes, no, not really, but he expects to have that conversation. But the bottom line is they've got some guys with some moxie.
Well, you got to get that number before they retire, right? Because both of those two wearing it. Berm, your takeaway
I'm
there.
fascinated by the entire transition of the defense. I think that this idea, and Ryan Day said it from the day he was hired, simple, right? They're going to go simple, fast. But then we also hear they're going to be more multiple. So they're going to be more simple, more multiple, add a new position, change other guys' positions, and somehow that's going to be less thinking. Yeah. So I'm fascinated to see.
It doesn't make sense to me.
No, I'm fascinated to see how it plays out.
I think it's an auto engine is actually just real simple parts put together in a certain way. You understand that, right? Yeah.
But it's the thing in my mind that just doesn't quite click, that what Berm is talking about. Well, if you're going to move around all these pieces and change the equation at linebacker, if you put Brendan White there, we have to take a linebacker off the field. You might have to put somebody else in the secondary. If you're going to change the front and go odd and even, you're going to remove one of the best defensive linemen in the country. Now, that doesn't mean that the way that they play is going to be slower or more complicated or whatever, but you're putting in more schemes.
It certainly sounds more complex to me.
You're adding in more zone coverages to mix, so you're not going press man all the time. Like, you would have thought that would have been easy.
What the problem was last year that got him in trouble was, and you hate to say this about an Ohio State defense, they weren't always gap sound. I mean, that's a basic tenet of playing defensive football. And by that, I mean, we've never, ever seen guys go coast to coast against Ohio State defense between the tackles or between the ends like happened last year against this defense. And to me, they're just kind of getting one more guy into the mix in my opinion, in the tackle box with that bullet deal, a guy who's capable of also falling back, maybe covering a slot guy on occasion. But they're I mean, I know Ryan Day, that hurts you cuts you to the quick when you see a guy go 70 yards on you and do it again, and then other guys do it. I mean, it's crazy.
And it's happening with that frequency. Berm, finish your thought. There's 2 weeks left here in spring ball. I think you were talking about the defense was the worst.
Yeah, I mean, we know that was the position and the side of the ball that there was the problems last year. That's why there's 4 new assistant coaches on defense. Obviously, Larry Johnson's the holdover. He's the best defensive line coach in America, and so you don't even think about asking him to move on. But to see what they're doing and have all these new coaches, all these new players, all these new positions, I just think it's going to be fascinating to watch how that unfolds, because we think of all those things and say, okay, this is going to be so much more complex, but they're saying it's going to be more simple, that it's less thinking, it's more acting. Yeah. And last year, if you watch, and Tim brought up, they were just in the wrong spot so many times. And I don't know if that's because Tuff Borland wasn't fully healthy. I don't know if that's because Baron Browning couldn't get healthy. I don't know if it's because the defensive ends were always rushing to the outside and leaving giant holes for defensive tackles that were being
a lot of times you saw guys just overrun things. I mean, that's what I mean. And by overrun, I mean one step the wrong way and suddenly an offensive lineman's blocking you here instead of here is a big difference. And that's what you saw in space from the linebacker situation a few times. But the other thing that intrigues me is they may be playing with one stick high, what I call one high safety 1 minute with this defense. They might drop guys into a 3 deep. I mean, what they're going to be trying to do, I think it's going to be more simple for them but it's going to be more complex, they think, for the defense to
right.
discern it.
And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition when you ask, how does that happen? But, for me, it's just really about watching what they do. I think one of the biggest issues a year ago, and we've talked about it repeatedly, was they just flat out played the wrong guys. And they put the wrong guys on the field, guys that were not capable of playing.
It took a long time for Brendan White to be discovered.
Playing the guys that were just not taking advantage of their opportunities and weren't able to run the defense the way it was last year. So if it was the schematics or whether it was personnel, whatever it is, that's all out the window. So we've only seen bits and parts of 4 practices this spring, and we'll get to see a full one on Friday. So
that'll be a big one.
It's interesting to see where it's developing, because that is what will make or break this Buckeye football team in 2019.
We'll have that on Friday, full coverage, obviously, of that open practice. Berm and I will be here. Tim will obviously be here. He never leaves, I think.
Do you have a room here?
This is what even my wife's wondering. What are you doing? I mean, I'm doing a little bit of, I'm working with Channel 10, doing stuff on wall-to-wall and things like that. But the thing, I've always enjoyed watching football practice. Yeah. I mean, because that's where you see, like I've always said, I've had a mechanical bent. I like to see how things are put together. And that's where you can see guys making strides. I'm not talking about, necessarily in the scrimmages, because things happen, but just the offensive linemen, the technique they work on, the defensive linemen and things like that. You see guys from one practice to the next get better, some don't, and I've always been intrigued by how you get 85 guys ready to play every year.
Well, that's why we have Tim trying to help us out as much as possible, as much as he's wanting to do here in his quasi-retirement, whatever you want to call it.
I'm backstroking into retirement.
So he's Tim May. This is Jeremy Birmingham. I've been Austin Ward. If I let these guys keep going,
you still are Austin Ward.
We would do. I still am.
Yeah,
I will always be. Perhaps we'll see. And these guys will go all day. So Berm's trying to throw me off and keep the show going.
I'm not. David Arnett as he walks by.
I'm not going to let that happen.
I never ever want to stop talking to people.
I know, but we're going to have to turn off the camera and get out of the woody, because they're probably going to start another practice here soon or something. But that's Tim. Berm, I'm Austin. This has been Lettermen Live, brought to you by Byers Auto. We'll see you next time.